Hello, I'm Paul Perrello, and welcome to the Philly Factor. My guest on this edition of our program is no stranger to the Philly Factor. He's appeared numerous times to talk about his wonderful books about Philadelphia. Thom Nickels is the author of books such as Philadelphia Architecture, Literary Philadelphia, Philadelphia Mansions, as well as legendary Locals, Center City, Philadelphia. But his new book is about a story that has captured the attention of the greater Philadelphia region, as well as news agencies across the country and perhaps even around the world. It's the story of a homeless man who arrives on the scene of a woman whose car runs out of gas in a very unsavory part of Philadelphia. He offers her, reportedly, his last $20 to help her get gas for her car and to get on her way. This otherwise Good Samaritan story takes on many twists and turns, more than perhaps a roller coaster at Dorney Park. Thom Nickels, welcome back to the program.
Hi, Paul. It's nice to be here.
It's always a pleasure when you're here. Your new book is called Learn to Do a Bad Thing Well, Looking for Johnny Bobbitt. Your book starts off with a very, very vivid picture of a neighborhood in Philadelphia that has earned quite the reputation. I could say that this neighborhood perhaps could be the poster child for drug addiction, heroin, crack cocaine, homelessness. And it's the part of town that has gotten a lot of attention, minus the whole Johnny Bobbitt chapter here. But you decided that you wanted to tackle, for lack of a better phrase here, the problem of homelessness. Was that the genesis of writing about homelessness and Johnny Bobbitt?
Well, I found, Paul, that when I was doing my weekly columns for this and that newspaper, that an awful lot of homeless people were crisscrossing through my neighborhood into the center of Kensington. And there's a Wawa there and a Rite Aid. And it became a gathering place over a period of time. And I noticed the slow growth. At first, it was a minor trickle. But it did accelerate, and then I thought there's really something extraordinary happening here. So I started to, I guess, write about the problem in a very general sense. And then as I got to know various people, I would interview some, get their stories. And of course, they're all sad, but they do all vary. Mm-hmm. And I found out a lot of stuff. A lot of my own stereotypes and misconceptions were thrown out the window.
Wow. The problem of homelessness is nothing new in Philadelphia, or for that matter, here in the United States. I mean, your book early on goes back to, I believe, 1909, when a man sort of went undercover and sort of wanted to get to the root of homelessness. You know, we think of homelessness as a contemporary problem, but not really so. I mean, we don't necessarily refer to them as homeless people back in the 19th century. We may refer to them as hobos and vagrants, but you know, the problem of homelessness is nothing new in the United States.
That's true. I think they called them tramps in the 19th century. Mm-hmm. And in my last book, Philadelphia Mansions, I do talk about the tramps that settled outside Lock Erie Mansion in Chester County. And I even found an old photograph of the tramps around a campfire in a woods, and they all have sports jackets on and white shirts and hats. So minor cosmetic difference, maybe.
Yeah. You venture into this territory then, and you know, one might wonder, were you nervous, scared, apprehensive? You know, as I said at the beginning of the show, it's an unsavory part of town. But now as you go on this journey, at any point did you ever feel threatened by these people that you were talking to? Because, you know, not for anything, you are encroaching upon their territory.
Well, the part of town that you're referring to is in the throes of a transformation now. My street, for instance, you can see 400K, 5-story, out-of-scale townhouses and people moving in from Brooklyn and California. And that is only about 2 blocks from the Wawa and the Rite Aid that I talk about. Mm-hmm. It's basically a really good, wholesome neighborhood, but I've always called it an undiscovered triangle until very, very recently. It's the part of the city between Lehigh Avenue and I would say York Street. I wasn't afraid to sort of talk to the homeless people because I guess when you're a journalist for enough time, that kind of shyness wears away very, very quickly. When you're told to interview Allen Ginsberg and Joan Baez and Frank Rizzo, you can pretty much talk to anybody.
Yeah.
And it's a great thing to learn how to do.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, that's what I did. Was I ever scared? There were a few sketchy characters, and there's a thread of meanness also within the opioid homeless so-called community, but it's really not a community because the people don't stick together. It's just filled with self-interest and it's all about me and getting my fix. That's a whole other story. But there were a few sketchy characters.
When you, where you would go through this part of town, you document in your book that, when you ventured into this part of Kensington, you were approached on at least one occasion by 5 different people, I guess,
Yes.
thinking you were there looking to score a hit.
That was a real epiphany for me because I had gone with a friend who said that he wanted somebody to walk with while he went into a house nearby. And I couldn't believe there were quite a number of people wandering up and down this small street. And it was a scene out of a B Hollywood movie. Literally, I don't like to use the word zombie because I don't think zombies are scary. I think they're too theatrical. These are worse than zombies. They're broken human beings who have been bent like dolls. So yeah, that was quite shocking to me. And I knew then that this problem goes deeper than the so-called legacy corporate media was reporting at that time. Because as I told you earlier, there was very little reporting on this. It took a while.
But I want to mention also that volunteers that were canvassing the streets of Philadelphia last year found more than 1,000 people living outside in the cold. That's about 100 more people than the year before. Now, that is a smaller increase than 2016 when the city's street homeless population was up by more than 30%. I don't want to give the impression that the city, or anybody for that matter, and there are great organizations out there that are working with the homeless, I don't want to make it seem that we have turned the corner on the problem of homelessness. I suspect there will always be a problem of homelessness because these people, the homeless people, feel trapped. They either don't want to come out of their safety zone because they're familiar, it's something that they're perhaps comfortable with, but I don't think we will ever really crack the problem of homelessness.
Well, I think that there are 2 types of homeless people as far as I'm concerned. Homeless people who don't have a drug problem, i.e. opioids, heroin, there are so many programs for those kinds of homeless, and they generally filter into the system, get help, and are put on some kind of artificial legs again. However, most of the people, 90% of the heroin addicted homeless that I've spoken to, while they may claim that they would like to get clean, it remains a utopian fantasy because they can't quite generate the self-discipline to change their lives. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. So basically, the homeless that you see on the street are there in a voluntary sense because they like the freedom. They like the freedom to do heroin when and where they want to do it. They don't like to be told what to do. Shelters have very strict rules, no cell phones. They have shutdown, blackout periods, and they can't abide by that. And quite a few of them have told me that they like the life on the street, that there's an air of freedom, although to us it looks like tremendous suffering.
Sure.
And it is. But I guess you can get used to anything, as William Burroughs once said.
So at what point then do you meet Johnny Bobbitt?
Well, He was in the Port Richmond shopping center, and he would sit in front of the Dollar Tree there with a big gulp Wawa cup and a pile of books. He was a compulsive reader. And I would see him on and off, and I thought, who is this guy reading books all the time? He had the same pose, and when he would meet people that he knew, he would stand up and shake their hand, and there was this southern accent, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. I thought, this is not your ordinary homeless bloke. Mm-hmm. So I eventually talked with him. I even gave him my card, told him I was a writer. That generated a kind of a friendship. I used to bring him books. In fact, he read my first book, The Cliffs of Ares, liked it. Eventually, we built up this acquaintanceship, and I would go and visit him, and I would watch as people would just drive up and bring him swag bags of socks and deodorants and men's care products, and it amazed me how much of a fan club that he had. Mostly middle-aged women, but there were some men. There was one woman, for instance, who did his laundry every week, who would come up and take all of his dirty clothes, take it home, wash it and fold it, and bring it back in a bag. So he had quite a hold on a lot of people. And so, you know, one thing led to another. I even had him into my house, and he became almost an ordinary person. However, he always denied his heroin addiction, which I found really, really interesting. All of his friends were all homeless as well, and I would see them every day, or when I saw them, go into, I think I call it in the book, Kensington's Heroin Trail. And they would just follow the same road, which basically follows the route of the 39 bus. And I thought, now Johnny's got to be on heroin. And he always told me that he was bipolar and that he was on a mood alteration drug. So that was a point of soreness between us. Mm.
And this, you meet Johnny well in advance of his notoriety that occurs at the end of 2018.
A full year.
A full year before.
Yeah.
And you know, so when we talk about Johnny Bobbitt, he had been in Philadelphia for, you know, he came up from the South. He had been living, and I think I read in the book, behind that Wawa or the Rite Aid. You know, there was a place where, you know, his mattress was, and that's where he stayed. And then all of a sudden, he's on the front page because he's depicted as this Good Samaritan.
Yes, which to me was very, very odd, because the last time I saw him before this big media implosion, I was waiting for a bus on Aramingo Avenue, and I saw Johnny walking up on the side of the road, and I said, "Hi, Johnny," and he just nodded, didn't have time to talk, which I thought was very, very strange and almost rude.
Sure.
And I thought, you can of worms, you know what? Mm-hmm. There's something going on. And, you know, lo and behold, 3 weeks later is when this whole thing went up in whatever you want to put it up in.
So what the media depicts is that, what this woman, Kate McClure, runs out of gas off of I-95. Johnny Bobbitt comes out of the dark, gives her his last $20 to get gas. She goes on her way, and then, as the media accounts let us believe, she wants to do something for him. But you present in your book that Kate and her boyfriend and Johnny may have all known each other before this incident off of I-95.
And it's more than probable that the place where they met was the Sugar House Casino. Johnny was a kind of a sometime gambler, and certainly Mark was a compulsive, chronic gambler with a problem. So it's extremely probable that that's where they met. The whole gas can thing, though, Johnny once on his Facebook page, when he was in Henderson, North Carolina, recorded a post that he made about helping a woman and her 3 children in a car who had run out of gas. And he basically was praising his own kindness in kind of saving this small family from a lot of misfortune. So this was an odd precursor kind of experience. Like, what? This whole gas can thing, it was too Walt Disney-like for me to believe. And, but the real problem for me was when, after all these donations came flooding through, was how when Johnny was on Good Morning America, when he was questioned by all these ace reporters who should have known better, nobody asked him what the nature of his drug problem was. They said, we understand that you had some kind of a drug problem. Is that true? He would say yes, and then the issue was dropped. Not 1 month after this thing, this 400K GoFundMe thing exploded, I was talking to Johnny friends in my neighborhood, and they told me that they had seen him on the street again doing drugs, following along the trail, going to Target and spending thousands of dollars on drugs and useless items. So I knew this a long time, but we couldn't prove it. We couldn't prove it. It was very, very frustrating to see all these well-meaning but oh so naive people empty their pocketbooks and wallets and just give and give and give.
Yeah. So up until this point, given your relationship with Johnny, having gotten to know him, and prior to this whole incident, with the gas can, when the story erupts the way that it does, and as we said, he's getting attention now from the local media as well as every, media outlet across the United States.
And they signed a book contract in Manhattan, too.
So, what goes through your mind when when this story breaks?
I thought the level of stupidity, I just could not believe that everybody was swallowing this big whale. It just, to me, it was incredible, because I would always meet his friends. I saw Johnny again buying heroin. Then it was, he has an Uber and he comes in from New Jersey when he was living in Kate's backyard. And even then, there were always Johnny reports. He's still buying heroin. And people were defending him on social media. He's a martyr, he's a victim, we should care for him, you can't criticize him. In fact, there was a period of time when criticizing Johnny Bobbitt was tantamount to, it was this big social sin. You were mean and cruel and didn't like the homeless.
We should mention also that the case involving Johnny Bobbitt and the other 2 individuals is, it's still out there. This probably will go to, I suspect, go to trial at some point, because there are a number of people that are out a lot of money. There's the whole, the problem with Kate and her boyfriend for living this lavish lifestyle, allegedly tapping into this GoFundMe fund to, go to exotic locations, and she was buying every type of, fashion handbag that there was out there. So we should mention that there's still litigation that is pending in this whole case, and yet after this all blows up, you no longer hear from Johnny. He sort of...
Oh no, he completely disappeared. It was like his former life didn't exist, only with certain friends. Although his best friends, and he had one really good friend who washed windows along the strip, and he had promised him that he would help him from this GoFundMe money. And there were a few of them who felt really burnt and betrayed. Johnny's not helping us. He didn't give us a cent. And so that was a point of contention. Also, when Johnny was panhandling in front of Dollar Tree, he was, I think 2 times, he was offered $100 a bus fare to go back to North Carolina, because that's what his sign said. Just want to go back home to sort of, make a good life for myself. But of course, the $100 did not go for a bus ride. But even after this had kind of blown up, and when the lid came off, they were still giving Johnny all of this rope. It was like, take enough rope and you'll hang yourself, which of course is what eventually happened with the latest arrest. And because they still, at the 11th hour, they expected him to abide by these guidelines as if he would change. He hadn't even been to like rehab yet. And I think it's a good lesson for all of us on how severe some heroin addictions are and how impossible it is sometimes to get off it.
So what's the takeaway from this for all of us? Because we said earlier in the program, homelessness is not going to go away. We all were taken in by this story. We all sit back and say, I can't believe we were had the way that we were. So what's the takeaway from this, Thom?
Well, the takeaway, to me, it's just common sense. But if you've never known a heroin addict, you're never going to know how severe and how deep that anchor plunges into the psyche and into the body. You don't give a heroin addict lots of money with a magic key to kind of use it as he or she pleases, because it's not going to work. They need to go away 5 months, 6 months into a rehab before they get a dime.
You recount with such vivid recollection the dates and the times. I think it's chapter 8 of the book. We only have about 5 minutes left. Obviously, we could go on for an hour here, but
it's like a forest fire.
Yeah, it's remarkable that right up until Christmas of 2018, where you and your friends are making all this food to take to the homeless.
Oh yeah.
And I was struck by the fact that you take this food there, and then you quickly realize that even all this food that you have is not enough to feed the homeless. And to me, it seems like society is just scratching the surface when it comes to not only Johnny Bobbitt, but all the Johnny Bobbitts that are out there and trying to get to the root cause or the root problem in our society today.
Well, we could go back and blame the Sackler family on the whole oxycodone thing and everything. And so there are other more sophisticated hidden roots to this massive crisis. But certainly it's a big crisis. I don't think safe injection sites are necessarily the answer. And as I tell friends, if you make it too easy, there's no impetus to sort of get off. If there's no internal strength in the direction of a personal reformation, and if society makes it really easy, the next step will be why don't we just give them the drug? Why do we have to make them suffer and work to get it? It's a problem.
So what's the end game here? I mean, how do you foresee, as a journalist, as an author, we wish that we could tidy up everything in a bow and say that Johnny's going to turn his life around and everything's going to be okay. But what do you really see as the end game here for Johnny Bobbitt?
Oh, for Johnny Bobbitt. Well, I can offer several predictions and theories. I'm not a very good psychic that way, but I suspect that at this point Johnny just wants to fade away. He certainly doesn't want the limelight anymore, and he certainly destroyed any last vestiges of that old hero status that he could have had.
Sure.
He could have made a great life for himself. But I think that's a lesson for all of it, and he still may redeem himself. You see, I always see hope. There's always hope. But I think it's a lesson for all of us. Sometimes we are our own worst enemies. It's a real Dr. Phil moment, to sound really corny.
Yeah. Maybe one day he'll show up on Dr. Phil and explain.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Better than Megyn Kelly, I guess, when
Well, she no longer has a show.
No, I know. I should, yeah.
Yeah. I can't, I really, really enjoyed the book. And you get pulled into this, and you again recount with such vivid memory where you were, the time, the date, the places, the names, and we really get an understanding of this problem, societal problem. And it could be Philadelphia, it could be St. Louis, it could be Los Angeles. It's a problem. It's a problem we need to tackle. It's a problem we can't take our eye off. We need to work to some type of solution. And ultimately, I guess the courts will decide what happens to Kate, her boyfriend, and Johnny.
Yes, and I suppose it won't be pretty. As I say in the book, it's the after party, but it's not such a happy after party.
Yeah. Thom, I want to thank you for another great book, and thanks for being with us here on the program. I always look forward when you're here. You always make for a great interview, and lots of luck with this book.
Thank you, Paul, very much. Thank you.
Until the next time, thanks so much, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in and watching The Philly Factor. My name is Paul Perrello. Have a great day.